I need a dollar, 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 that's what I need. Hey, hey. Well, I need a dollar, 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 that's what I need. Hey, hey. Said I need a dollar, 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 that's what I need. And if I share with you my story, would you share your dollar with me?
Today, Dr. Marsha Firestone joins It's a Small Business World. Thank you, Marsha, for taking the time.
My pleasure. I'm happy to be here and to help you out.
Well, thank you. And as owner of E. Richards Consulting, a boutique staffing firm in Connecticut, I've been very aware of the power of small business and also been a member of the WPO for many years. As founder of the WPO, the Women's President Organization, and the WPEO, the Women Presidents Educational Organization, can you talk to us a little bit about what your inspiration was for starting the WPO?
Well, I was working for the American Women's Economic Development Corporation. They were an organization that provided training for startup and young businesses for women. And while I was working for AWED, I realized that there were many programs for startup and young businesses, but nothing for women who had already achieved a certain level of success. And so I thought that that was a market that was not being served, and that I would recommend to AWED, since I was up for the presidency, that we start the Women Presidents Organization.
And that was in 1997, correct?
That was in 1997. We started the first chapter here in New York City. The second chapter was in Los Angeles. The third chapter was a second chapter in New York City. And the next year we added 5 more chapters, and then we were off and running.
Now, I think you told me earlier this month that you have your 116th chapter?
We launched our 116th chapter in Ottawa 2 weeks ago. We are now in 10 countries. We are on 6 continents, and 15% of our members are global. The other 85% are domestic, U.S. domestic. And we actually will be adding an additional 6 chapters by the end of this year.
How much traveling does that involve for you?
Too much. It involves a lot of travel. There are 3 vice presidents now, a VP of operations, a VP of development, and a VP of facilitation. And so what we have been trying to do is take turns so that not one person is shouldered with having to take these long trips, because the more we grow internationally, the more these trips are required.
So you have your PhD in communications from Columbia University, correct?
Correct.
And I know you had the opportunity to meet Margaret Mead.
I did.
So you have great, I guess I would imagine she was a bit of a mentor to you.
Well, she wasn't exactly the kind of woman who would be a mentor, but what happened is she was on the faculty of Columbia University, and that's where I was getting my PhD. And I wanted to, she had done a lot of research in the field of nonverbal communication. So I wanted her expertise, and I wrote to her. She did not answer me. So I was at the Museum of Natural History with my husband, and we were attending a lecture series called Birth, Marriage, and Death. And he said to me, you know, she didn't answer you. You go ask her again. And I said, no, I couldn't do that. And he said, oh, yes, you can. And so the audience was 3,000. I waited till all 3,000 people had gone, and I went up to Margaret Mead and I told her that I had written to her and she had not answered me. And she said, write me again. And I did. I wrote her again. and she answered me, and she said she would work with me on my dissertation, and she did. And she came to my defense, and there were 5 men and Dr. Mead. She had on her cape and her trident, which she threw down, and she said, as she took her seat at the head of the table, she said, "This is one of the best dissertations I've read in recent years. Any questions?" And no one asked me a single question. They spent all the time talking to her. And I was off the hook, and my proposal, my plan, my research was accepted.
That's a great story.
There's a previous story too, but I won't tell that one.
So one of the things I hear from that story, especially with your writing again and, you know, discussing it with your husband, is that you have great tenacity.
I think that's probably true. I don't give up, although I learned to have even more tenacity from some leaders in the women's business community that I respected, and I saw, you know, when things got tough, that they kept going, that they didn't give in. And I feel that way as well, that I don't give in, not easily. Now, there's an upside and a downside. The upside is the tenacity makes you hold on even when the days are dark, and you keep on going. And then the downside is that maybe you hold on too long to certain things, such as maybe staff that you might not want to keep that long, or you keep on just going when probably you should put a stop to certain things. So I recognize that it has its good side and its bad side.
So can you tell me, Marsha, when you were founding the WPO, what was your mission?
Well, I used to go around the room at AWED and ask, you know, the women who were there whether or not they were there for a reason, you know, what was their dream. And we would go around the room and they would say, well, I just want to support myself and my family, because at that time there was a recession and a lot of people had lost their jobs. Not the senior people and not the junior people, but the people in the middle, who were primarily the women. And they would talk about the fact that they just wanted to be able to support themselves and their families. And they would not talk about the big dream. None of them said, I have this big dream, I want to have $1 zillion and I want to have 92 locations. Nobody said that, not at that time. And my dream was to see women succeed on a larger level, so that they did not succeed just on a business that had self-employment or 1 or 2 employees. I wanted to see women really grow their companies.
That's a big dream.
Well, it is a big dream, but it is coming true.
Yeah.
Because we're seeing a tremendous amount of growth in not only the number of women-owned businesses, but the size of women-owned businesses. Last year's, well, I guess it wasn't last year's, but the last census report indicated that women had grown businesses at a rate that was 50% higher than those grown by men, than those grown by males.
Mm.
So we are seeing definitely some improvement in the sizes of business. But there's also been a tremendous amount of focus on microenterprise and small businesses, and there's been very little recognition of what businesses at this level, the Women Presidents Organization, at what the recognition that there are businesses at this level and that they contribute substantially to the economy and to the number of employed.
And that really is something that when I first heard you speak and you talked about, I'll never forget it, we were at Tavern on the Green in New York City at one of the awards lunches. And I nearly fell off my chair when I heard you talk about the infusion of dollars that women-owned businesses infuse into our economy, our national economy every year. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Well, the data that the Census Bureau, the most recent Census Bureau provided, 9.1 million businesses are woman-owned, 9.1. And I think the number of businesses owned by women and men total about 26 million.
Okay.
There are women-owned businesses generate $1.4 trillion in revenues. 1.4 trillion. That's a lot.
That's a lot.
And employ 7.9 million and account for 30% of all the businesses that are owned. 30% are women-owned.
Mm-hmm.
Now, just add to that for a minute the WPO numbers. Average revenues of a WPO member, 13 million. The aggregate revenues are 19.6 billion.
Mm.
The average number of employees are 94. The aggregate number are 145,000. The average years in business are 22. The aggregate years in business are 34,000 years of experience. Those are phenomenal numbers, and that's just WPO. And there are our current members are the ones who have the most influence and interest in adding additional members.
Can you share with us a little bit from your perspective? I mean, because you have a lot of members, and I would imagine that over the last 5 years, since the downturn in our economy, and now things are picking back up again, that you've heard from a lot of the women owners, business owners. Can you talk a little bit about that?
In what respect?
Well, how the economy has affected their businesses,
sure.
How they're enduring that, some I'm sure have been, have had a positive effect. In every downturn there's positives and negatives, right?
Well, every year we do an economic impact study, and we ask that question. And every year it's a little bit delayed because we do it in September, so we're doing it on the year past. Mm. So you have a little bit of perspective then.
Which is a good thing.
Right, which is a good thing. And even during 2008, 2009, the women were optimistic, which, sort of blew my mind.
Exactly.
But they were optimistic and continued to move ahead. Now, I don't know if being part of WPO helped them, but 75% mentioned that WPO was helpful to them, mm-hmm. even in the darkest days mm-hmm. of the recession.
Sure, because you have your sort of internal board, if you will, and you can rely on them for strength.
Right.
And
help
conversation.
you get through
exactly.
the difficult days. You can, even when you're not in a meeting, pick up a phone and call a member and say, help, I need your input. Tell me what you think about this.
Yes, and I think for women entrepreneurs and women business owners, my experience has often been that it's sometimes lonely, because you're doing it alone. You're the head of your business alone, you may have employees, but you're still alone in it.
Alone, and you can't really discuss certain things with your employees.
Exactly.
So being able to speak in a confidential way with your chapter members, to share your concerns and your issues and your operational issues and your strategic issues, I think gives you a chance to really learn from one another and deal with the stress that you're facing on a day-to-day basis. And at the same time, you don't have to open up to your employees. You can open up to your chapter members, many of whom have had the same issues, and can say, well, when I experienced that, this is what I did.
Yeah, there's a real comfort in knowing you're not alone.
Right. We actually have an invitation that we send out that says, it's lonely at the top. And it invites potential members to join with that invitation. It's lonely at the top.
That must get a good response.
It does get a good response because it is indeed lonely at the top.
Yeah, yeah. And even though the numbers are growing, it's still a smaller percentage of people, women, taking this initiative to start their own businesses and to grow and have a dream for growth.
Well, we're seeing a lot more of that, whether it is the fact that people are much more realistic, women are much more realistic about what's going on in the corporate world and they don't want a part of it. Mm-hmm. I think that's probably a piece of why they're making a decision. But they also want to make their own decisions, control their own time, have more power, have more influence. They don't want to be a keg, a nail. They want to really be able to make the decisions. And the only place that women can really do that is, and I call it the great equalizer, is entrepreneurship.
The great equalizer, that's a great way of saying it. So do you feel as though your dream when you started the WPO is coming to fruition?
Absolutely. More than I could ever have dreamed or wished for. When I had the idea to start the WPO, I did not think it would be global. In fact, when the person from Canada came to visit me and said, I want to start a chapter in Canada, I had never even thought about starting a chapter in Canada. So, yes, there are things, the first conference we had 40 attendees. This year we had 850 people registered. So, yes, it is definitely reinforcing the fact that my dream is coming true, and more than what I dreamed.
That's congratulations. That's a great story to hear. Where do you see the economy going in the next 5 years, and how will that affect the WPO and the women who are part of it?
Well, I am definitely not an economist, and I really don't know where it's going in the next 5 years, whether it's the growth of the U.S. economy specifically will accelerate. I don't know that, but I do know that our women are very committed to growth. We had a program at our conference this year, which was an all-day program offered by the Owner-President Management Program at Harvard to our members, focused on growth. And I would say that the women in WPO will have a tremendous amount of growth. Now, we do a study every year of the 50 fastest growing women-led companies, and just to give you some idea, the #1 winner this year started out in business 4 years ago at 30 million, and the #1 winner ended this year and applied with 760 million in revenues.
And what does that business do? What's the focus?
It's a business called 31 Gifts, and it is all kinds of accessories,
Okay.
scarves and pocketbooks, and I think they sell it sort of like a Tupperware.
Oh, okay.
Is sold. But can you imagine in 4 years going from 30 million
Phenomenal
to
growth.
760 million, right?
Phenomenal
Right.
growth.
And the growth, just to give you an idea, let's see, I have a number here that I want to share with you, that there was a 20% increase from the year before last to this year in the revenues of the 50 fastest. A 20% increase.
That's significant.
Right.
What does that tell you?
Well, it tells me that women are growing their businesses, and that they're going to continue to grow them. And it's just tells me that, you know, it's not those little businesses that people may perceive or think that women own. It's not just the crafts and the baked goods and the businesses that the nail salons, or I mean, I think that a lot of the public perceives that that's what women own, those kinds of businesses, and in fact that's absolutely not true on the larger businesses.
Let me ask you this, because I find you to be fascinating, and
I'm not sure if my husband would agree.
I'm so curious to know, what is your, like, if you had to say, what's your number one inspiration for doing what you do and having your
I
tenacity?
think you're going to laugh when you hear this story. So when I was a kid, and my mother and father and brother and I would finish dinner, my mother would say to my brother, "Okay, see you later," and he would go outside and play football, and she would make me do the dishes. And I thought that even though she worked with my father owned a chain of optical stores, and she was there every day, she said that I had to do the dishes, and he could play football, but I had to do the dishes. And when I would ask her why, she would say, "He's a boy and you're a girl." And I always resented the lack of equality. So equality is what I'm after. I think it's unjust for women of color, for men of color. I think it's unjust to limit what you can have or do or experience because of lack of objectivity.
I would never have guessed that would be it, but that's so, I mean, that's so rudimentary. It really is something that inspired you straight on from your childhood.
Absolutely. I was, very grown up.
Yeah, and you look back.
Right, exactly.
And so, I know our time is wrapping up, but I wanted to ask you, in terms of your corporate sponsors, how committed are they, and what kind of growth are you seeing there in commitment?
Well, we are very, very honored to have some amazing sponsors who support us and have been there since the very beginning. IBM and American Airlines were our first two sponsors, and they're still our sponsors. American Express Open is a sponsor that has been with us for many years, as has Walmart and Sam's Club, as have Chubb, Avis, PNC Wealth Management, KeyBank, Prudential, UPS, Wells Fargo, and PwC. And
That's quite a list.
It's quite a list, and it validates us but it also gives us the support. A lot of their leadership that work with us are women, corporate women who believe in what we're doing, and having that support and that help is major. They also help us by sitting on our board and sharing ideas with us, which we appreciate. But even more importantly, they underwrite about $1,000 of the membership fee, and they do that through their financial support, which is 40% of our revenue comes from our sponsors. And so our members do not pay as much as they would if they didn't have that support.
Oh, that is really significant. Do you find that they, in terms of their initiatives to do business with women-owned businesses, do you find that that commitment is growing, Marsha?
To do business with
women-owned businesses, that the corporate commitment.
Well, there are two different issues here. One is the doing business with women as vendors.
Correct.
That's one issue.
Right.
And that's a marketplace that is opening up. And I see it opening up more, but also I see that there's some difficulties because there's a consolidation of companies. That's one aspect. That's the Women Presidents Educational Organization. The other aspect is the Women Presidents Organization. They're not looking to open up new markets. The companies that I just talked about, they're not looking to open up new markets from the division that they're in. Maybe there's someone in their company who is looking for that.
Got it.
But what they are doing is they are supporting women-led and women-owned businesses from a different perspective, from their marketing, from their commitment to support women-led companies. The other piece of it is more for women as vendors, and
yes,
that I see definitely over the years. I mean, it's been 15 years since we worked on that, or we began working on that, and we have seen definitely more interest in doing business with women-owned businesses.
Okay, so you do see growth in that area.
Yes, I definitely do.
Okay.
Not enough, but I see growth.
And why do you say not enough?
Well, because there's still a struggle for women to get the contracts, and there's still, I think, the perception that women own these small businesses that can't service a large corporation. I don't think that's true.
So how do you change that perception? How does that, is that an evolution over time?
It's an evolution over time. It's PR, it's me talking about it, it's you talking about it, it's everybody out there selling that idea. It's the supplier diversity departments and the procurement departments within the corporations. It's everyone's collective effort.
Okay, that makes sense. And let me ask you this, what advice do you have for the women out there, the women who have been in the trenches working in their businesses, the women who are thinking about starting their own business? What piece of advice would you give?
I don't think that growing a business can be grown alone. I think you have to have a team. The team has to work together. You have to collaborate. I think more than just having a team, you have to experience educational content like joining a WPO to help you to grow. There are many different steps that you can take. You cannot succeed, in my opinion, if you are out there by yourself. If you have help from your team, from organizations, from a collaborative and collective effort, you are more likely to succeed.
So you would advise women to become a member of the WPO in organizations that are collaborative?
Yes, definitely.
And in closing, I'm very curious, what are your goals in business for the next 2 to 5 years?
Well, I'm not retiring. If you thought I was going to say I'm going to retire,
no,
they're going to carry me out.
That never even crossed my mind, actually.
I want to grow both the WPO and the WPEO. I want to grow the WPO to have it larger internationally, but I also want to maintain the intimacy that the members have with each other, and they can only have that in the small groups. So I do want to continue to grow the organization, but at the same time keep that individualized aspect intact. So I don't want to be a mass organization. For WPEO, I want eventually for us not to ever need to have a WPEO. Mm-hmm. Because once we are able to really participate in the mainstream of contract opportunities, then you won't need WPEO anymore.
That's so true. So you're going to phase it out eventually.
Well, I'm
by your
hoping
success.
that at some point, right, that
Yeah.
it will be so successful that we won't need it.
And lastly, because this is something I think as a woman and an entrepreneur with the status that you have, I'm interested to know, what is your opinion on the glass ceiling?
Oh, I think the glass ceiling is very definitely there. I think that there is a prohibition on going further for women. I think even the women who make it, they face such struggles to be recognized as successful, and I think they're examined with a microscope, and I don't think that it's all fair. It goes back to being unjust, which annoys me to no end.
And motivates you.
And motivates me, right.
Thus your dream for the next 2 to 5 years.
Right. I mean, I think these women who are in the executive seat have a great opportunity, but a great deal of stress and unreasonable expectations.
Mm-hmm. Any advice for them?
Tenacity.
Mm-hmm.
I think tenacity. You know, Meg Whitman is succeeding. She's doing very well. So she's a good example of someone who's making it. But I think it is about tenacity and keeping moving ahead, moving forward.
And it reminds me of that, that article that came out on the cover of Time magazine a few months ago, "Don't Hate Me Because I'm Successful." You know, the woman who wrote that book about that there's even resentment for women who are successful.
Resentment from both men and women.
Yes.
In fact, some of the worst things I've ever had happen to me have come from women.
Mm-hmm. And how do you deal with that in your own mind and in your
Well,
own business?
now that I'm older and wiser, I realize that, there's probably some competitive jealousy, and so I just keep on going. When I was younger, it was much harder to deal with. Mm-hmm. Now I have a modus operandi.
Mm-hmm. So what would you tell a younger woman who maybe is struggling with some of that today?
Look at the source and what they are saying, and examine them closely. Why are they saying it? Is it because they are struggling and not being as successful as you? or is it that they have some inborn shortcomings, or not shortcomings, but maybe they just don't have the strength to make it to where you are. And so they are very negative about you and what you've accomplished, and you have to understand who's saying it and why they're saying it.
Excellent advice. Well, Dr. Firestone, thank you so much. I always think of you as Marsha, but because you're just so warm, but it is Dr. Marsha Firestone. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. My pleasure.